Good day, my politically curious chums. Welcome back to the channel where we explore the state of UK politics with a fine mix of wit, irony, and a proper helping of sarcasm. Today we're diving into the baffling yet all too familiar antics at Westminster. Yes, the same circus where the clowns are our politicians. And speaking of clowns, have you ever noticed how they both love to juggle promises? Except in one case it's bananas and in the other it's policies. Stay tuned as we unpick the latest spectacle, lowering the voting age to 16.
Current government policy affects children. The whole of education policy affects children today. Does that mean that 11 and 12-year-olds should have the vote just because education policy currently affects them?
Now, Keir Starmer says if you're old enough to pay taxes, you deserve to be able to vote. Is it a good idea, though, to lower the voting age to 16? Saffron Gilbert-Kaluba believes it would help bring the younger generation into the political conversation. Samantha Smith says we can't place the responsibility of voting at children's doors, however.
Now, before you imagine a bunch of teenagers running the country and turning our parliament into a rave, here's the twist. The Prime Minister is touting this initiative as a bold, forward-thinking move for youth empowerment. But is it really about giving young people a voice, or is it just another desperate ploy by Labour, who, by the way, were looking a bit under the cosh in the latest polls, to cling to power like a toddler to their favourite blankie?
Samantha, let's start with you then. So Keir Starmer's saying if 16-year-olds are old enough to go and work, to pay taxes, surely they should have a say in those taxes.
Well, when Keir Starmer and other Votes at 16 campaigners describe the hypothetical 16-year-olds that have adult responsibilities and so should be allowed the adult duty of voting, they're describing my life. At 16, I was homeless. I worked 3 jobs to survive. I slept in bus stops, sofa surfed on friends' couches, flitted between kids' accommodations, and did anything I could to survive. But 16-year-olds like me don't need a vote to empower us and to enable us to have a voice and be represented. We need adults to do their jobs and act in our best interest. The Children's Act defines a child as anyone under the age of 18, and the burden of responsibility should not be for ballot paper should not be placed in the hands of babes. Frankly, I think that it is a failure of our protective duty to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to be classed as adults before they are developmentally and legally able to be classed as such.
Grab your cuppa and settle in. This is going to be a bumpy, hilarious ride. Now, let's get to the real meat of the matter. Some might see this move as a genuine effort to educate and empower the youth politically. Hey, if you're old enough to earn your pocket money, you deserve a say in how it's spent. But others view it as little more than a clever trick by Labour.
That's fine. And Prime Minister, you might be aware that this House has hosted members of the UK Youth Parliament in the chamber. They recently had their annual sitting. It's made up of more than 300 young people aged between 11 and 18, so we all got to watch for our jobs, I think, as seeing what they did on the day. They came here and we caught up with them. We have I should perhaps put an advert in for our podcast, Committee Corridor. I'm sure it's your top listening material, Prime Minister. But maybe that could be part of your preparation next time. And we asked them what question they would put to you if they were here. So let me ask you what they wanted to ask, which is that they were highlighting the fact that the government promised as an election in the manifesto to lower the voting age to 16, but that's for, of course, for UK Parliament elections and local elections in England and Northern Ireland. Of course, in Scotland it's there already. The commitment wasn't included in the King's speech, so they want to know, Prime Minister, when might they see legislation coming forward on this issue?
Picture this. If the voting age drops to 16 and as the demographic shifts, we end up with a perpetual youth vote that keeps Labour in power virtually forever. Let's be honest, Labour's polls have been looking as flat as a pint left out in the sun. This move might be less about political education and more about a desperate manoeuvre to secure votes in future elections.
We will definitely get it done. It's a manifesto commitment and we intend to honour it. I think that if you're old enough to go out to work, if you're old enough to pay your taxes, then you are entitled to have a say on how your taxes are spent. And also we do have voting at a younger age in different parts of the United Kingdom, and the sky didn't fall in. It's a commitment we made, it's a commitment we intend to keep.
Okay, so you're trusting 16-year-olds with that, and they also wanted to know whether you think there should be more political education. Certainly that's something they wanted to see in order, if they're voting at 16, to be well educated in making their decisions as a voter.
Yeah, I would term it as sort of more education about, citizenship, rather than sort of pure political indoctrination, but citizenship, and how the state works, how you participate in it, what the institutions and structures are. And I'm very pleased to see that that is part of the curriculum. I think it's important that everybody learns about citizenship.
So, and of course, there's a curriculum review going on with the Secretary of State for Education. So you're leaning into seeing more political education. Can I read that from what
I
you
don't
just
want
said?
to preempt the outcome of that review, but there is a review going on. You're absolutely right about that.
Okay.
Now it's your turn, dear viewers. What do you think? Is this an enlightened reform that could breathe new life into our democracy, or just another politically motivated scheme to keep the powers that be in power? Are we really ready to let 16-year-olds call the shots, or are we setting the stage for the endless reign of Labour?
They are, but they are old enough to be taxed.
Yeah, exactly. And I completely don't agree with that. I think with 16 and 17-year-olds, with voting, a lot of the policies are going to affect them. For example, the national service policy proposal, the smoking ban, that would most likely affect 16 and 17-year-olds now. So I find it a weird nanny state rhetoric in terms of, disenfranchising a certain demographic to not vote when they're fully capable.
But
What about the suggestion that Sir Keir Starmer wants this to happen? Because poll after poll does show that 16-year-olds, teenagers, tend to the left. And if they're going to go to the right, that's not until they're in their late teens or early 20s. So he's getting an inbuilt advantage. He's doing it for cynical reasons.
And let's not forget the classic question, if the clowns are in charge, does it mean the circus is now running the show? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below.
So I understand that there are definitely political, advantages, but I would say for me as a 16-year-old, as a young business owner, I would say that being able to take a more active role when I was 16 and, seeing about education within tech and things like that, I would have been able to reap a bit more benefits than we are now, because back then I believe the older voting generation didn't want to do that.
Current government policy affects children. The whole of education policy affects children today. Does that mean that 11 and 12-year-olds should have the vote just because education policy currently affects them?
We will have to had a vote on it. 52% of you said yes, 16-year-olds should get the vote.
Oh, right.